Today we're going to talk about what is personal spiritual power. Up until now, I've been talking about the things which take us away from our power, why that has been there, and what it feels like to be away from your power. So personal spiritual power involves many elements which need to be practiced and with a lot of patience, because it takes time to establish oneself in the state of consciousness that you would call personal spiritual power. First of all, it's important to be aware that the original essential state of any human being is empowered, but the normal state of most people is disempowered, or you have forgotten what it's like to be in your power. How do you come into a state of personal power when you don't really know what that is? Mostly, when people go into the superiority aspect of ego, that is called, or gets to be called, personal spiritual power. And when you're in the inferiority aspect of ego, that's called being away from your spiritual power. However, both of those, the superiority and the inferiority side of ego, is a disempowered state. The superiority is a compensation for the dread of inferiority, and the inferiority is to do with not wanting to be called egotistical. So neither of those work. When you have a spiritual awakening, or even a moment where you feel, okay, now this is what it's like to be in my power, it'll be a moment that you can feel, and that's nothing to do with the superiority form of ego. It is a feeling that you are exactly who you are right with yourself. You feel that you can hold that state because it's a natural state. There are many signs of being in your power. You will feel it from the inside, and other people around you will also feel it. What happens is that you can establish yourself in your personal spiritual power, but any little thing can instantly shoot you out of it, and then you compensate for that and go either into the superiority or the inferiority aspect of ego. And this is because the provocations that occur in the social environment trigger your wound, and your reaction to your wound is to go either to the superiority or to the inferiority. And there is the relationship between people in that disempowered state where someone is playing the predator, someone else is playing the prey. So the predator is in the superiority of ego and the prey is in the inferiority. And then the game goes as usual, and somebody loses, somebody seems to win, but ultimately nobody wins. This is the normal state, and it's normal to the point where you just keep on reverting to the game that you usually play. Sometimes the superior, sometimes the inferior. Meditation is very important in this, because when you're meditating, you're sitting with yourself, you're thinking very deeply and bringing yourself to the stage that we can sometimes call soul consciousness. There is a certain vibration, a resonance, a feeling of being at one with yourself. But it is very often rather fragile. So you come into it, but then any little thing can push you out of it. Then you lose connection with it. Then you have to again and again re-establish yourself. So I think it is a matter of getting used to the difference between when you're in your personal power and when you're away from it. And it's a matter of feeling the state when you're in it. So when you're in it, you're totally in touch with yourself. You feel who you are, you know who you are, and you are comfortable in who and what you are. Around you, there will be many circumstances which are specially designed to take you out of that. And the practice, when you're sitting in meditation, involves no provocation. But as soon as you come out of meditation and you go into a normal, regular social situation, then the triggers to take you out of your personal spiritual power are active, and your resilience needs to be developed. Your ability to stay with who you are, regardless of those provocations, depends on some other elements, which we will also need to look at. A lot of it has to do with your conditioning. People who have a lot of wounds have these wounds as they grow up, and that is all part of their conditioning. Someone who is wounded through a lot of put-downs, a lot of rejection, a lot of messages and statements that are specially designed to take you out of your personal power, create several series of messages which your social environment will lock you into very easily because there are so many of them. I think the first thing to do is to identify what are the different provocations or stimulations that replicate the social circumstances where you would be taken out of your power. For example, some people are wounded by being shouted at, some by being rejected, some by being told they're not good enough, they're too slow, they're too fast. Various different comments about the fact that whatever they are doesn't suit the other people in the social environment. And so your disempowered state is to shift yourself quite quickly and quite frequently to try out some ways of being that correspond to what will satisfy the outside people, the people outside you, the people around you. And that means that you're further and further and further away from your personal spiritual power. This is because of being under the influence of the other people in your surroundings, and a very deep feeling, regardless of the messages, but a very deep feeling inside that whatever it is you are is not all right. So this comes when you have had in childhood many, many messages from many, many people to say that whatever it is you are is not okay. It puts you in a bind, a kind of catch-22, because whatever it is you are is not okay, and whatever it is you do to make yourself okay is even more okay than before you did that. So you're in a bind and you can't come out of it. That means there's something you need to break. And part of it is something that we may call attachment. You want to be approved of. You want to be considered good, competent, acceptable. You want approval. So many things. These are different desires that you have. And all of it because you do not feel, fundamentally, you do not feel okay. And that is your wound. So anytime anything around you is perceived by you to be as you ought to be, as you should be, and you want to be that way, but you're not that way, it disempowers you more and more and more, and finally puts you into a state of extreme tension where you may have something explosive or implosive and run away from the situation. And always you remain away from your spiritual power, your personal spiritual power. There are some ways that you need to apply to work through this. And this involves sitting down and writing your story. This is a method for identifying, putting your finger on what are all the circumstances where your state of disempowerment gets triggered. And these come in patterns. So once you have identified the patterns, and there may be many of them, you may begin by identifying one or two patterns. So you see those patterns, you take yourself back to early childhood, the earliest times where you experienced it. For example, a very common thing that many people experience is a message that tells them they're not good enough. This expression, you'll never be good enough, or you'll never make it, or you'll never be as good as some other person that you're compared with. This word never is often there. This word enough is often there. So never and not enough go together, and the meaning of those words is something quite damaging because it takes you away from the hope that you can become all right. And this is why it's so damaging in very early childhood, because the early childhood experience, that child will believe what the child hears from the caretakers, from the educators, from the parents, from the religious leaders. These are the main influences. And when all three of them say the same thing, you'll never be as good as so-and-so, or you'll never be able to make it, or you'll never be good enough, you might as well just accept that you'll never make it. And it causes a person to lower themselves in order for the external moral authorities to say, okay, this is good enough, this is nice. Because what does the person want? The person wants to be loved. What does a child need is love and structure in the early days. So in a dysfunctional environment, love is not there and structure is also not there because there's chaos and the people around are personally weak. So you see that your own needs are not met and the people around you are also personally weak. So that is what is the model for you. You learn to be weak by hearing that you're not good enough, that you're not strong enough. So these patterns, they need to be identified, and they need to be identified quite precisely and exactly, so that you can see in yourself what words, what tones of voice, what circumstances, what configurations of people create certain negative feelings or emotions in you, where you're getting socialized or conditioned to be not in your personal power. And the idea of doing this is to neutralize the many different little moments of conditioning, because it has to be undone one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. You can understand that this is quite a lot of work, but on the other hand, you are worth it. One thing that intercepts the fact that you are worth it is a doubt that you're not worth it. Because if you'll never be good enough, then it gets in the way of you actually putting in the effort to do what you need to do, because you know in advance that it will always fail. And you continue to diminish yourself, to lower yourself. Then the other side of ego will cut in and come in there, and you will be reactive. You will be angry. You will say, I am good enough. I don't want to listen to this anymore. You will go against those people. You will be rebellious. You will actually reduce your position of power even more, because when you act from that reactive position, you're still not coming into your power. You're still going into the superior ego state. So then you have to look, okay, what really is it to be in my personal spiritual power? And it needs to be played with. It is something that has to be calibrated. You might get it for a moment and then lose it. But it's very important to keep going. If you have a trusted therapist, a trusted friend, someone that you can do this with, that is also very helpful. But a lot of time you're really doing it on your own, and it's quite difficult to do it on your own because you don't have any reference point to check whether you are on the right track or not. So this is why it's really very good to have someone with you who will be able to reflect back to you and say, yeah, now I feel that you're in your power. Or yeah, now I feel in harmony with you, in resonance with you. Something like this is really very helpful. Okay, let's look at writing. What do you write when you're writing your story? One place to start is the one thing that you try to overcome, some negative characteristic or something that you feel is a weakness, but somehow you never manage to overcome it. Write down that in your notebook. Get yourself a nice, good, clean, new notebook and write this thing down. Give a name to it. Sometimes you can't give a name to it. You can also try calling it by the name of an animal, or a color, or another object, something that represents that feeling that you have where you always get triggered and pulled away from your power. If we stick with the example of you will never be good enough, then maybe you just take the word never and the word enough. And taking those two words, try to remember the earliest time in your life when you heard never and not enough. And try to remember who said this to you, under what circumstances it was said. And it may well be that you had done something, maybe you had broken something, or you had failed in something, or you had annoyed that person, and they reacted to you by this put down, by these words. You'll never be good at school. You'll never make it to college or university. You'll never be able to have a successful relationship. You'll never be able to cook a potato properly. Something like this, which corresponds to a mistake that you might have made when that person is in a bad mood. What you do when you're remembering it is you remember also how that went in and hurt your heart and made you feel something. What did you feel? Find a word for that. Did it make you feel less than? Did it make you feel shame? Did it make you feel you wish you'd never been born? Sometimes you might even have heard this. It would have been better if you had not been born. Or some people, they hear, oh, you were a mistake, you'll never amount to anything because you were a mistake anyway. These various kinds of put-downs can come to you. Quite often it is accompanied by physical violence. You may be told a word like this and also hit. Or you may be told phrases like this and then given another kind of punishment like, go to your room. We don't want to see you. We don't want you to come with us to the picnic. You are bad. You are not really part of this family. You don't belong. What are you doing here? Why are you in this room? How dare you think that you're something special? These kinds of things will come again and again and again, and they will be combined very often with some kind of punishment, and you take it in and it hurts your heart. And so what you start doing in this kind of situation is you start freezing over or numbing your feelings. And this is how the ego gets built. So coming into your personal power requires taking a look at these patterns because of how they anesthetize you from yourself or separate you from yourself, and you build this artificial self which is trying to be acceptable, which is trying to be receiving honor, care, respect, regard, which is due to you, but which is denied to you. So you start to write, and it's really very, very good to allow yourself to just write, sometimes even automatically. In the beginning, you might not really find very much comes out of your pen. If you're writing with a pen or you're writing on your computer, it doesn't really matter what it is, but you need to get this flow beginning so that you have words that correspond with something that is a very deep feeling inside you that you hadn't necessarily put words on. Sometimes even these things happen to you so young that you haven't even really begun to be good in language, and it becomes pre-verbal feelings that are very raw, very deep, and that you just don't have any words for. You have an extreme feeling which is also numbed and repressed, and you don't have a word for it. In that case, try to find a sound, because even if a person doesn't yet know how to speak, but they know how to make a sound, and you can try different sounds to correspond with your feelings. You can go somewhere where you're alone, in the woods or in the streets where there's nobody around, and just allow yourself to make those sounds. And then when you're writing, you could even write some kind of symbol that represents that sound, because you want to take the thing which is inside and put it outside. Something you write on a sheet of paper is outside your body. It's not in your mind. It's not part of you. It has a certain objectivity when you put it on a piece of paper out there, and you can look at it later on, because how you feel at different moments is going to vary enormously. You may be feeling this very intensely. You write it down while you're feeling it intensely. You come back to it 10 days later and you're not feeling that very intensely. But when you see that which you have written, or the signs and symbols that represent something that you felt, when you see those signs and symbols, they will very often trigger that feeling, but you're still a little bit more objective than you were when you were actually feeling it and writing in the moment of feeling. This gives you distance from it, and it also helps you that when a present time, current situation replicates that early situation and you see the similarities, you can say to yourself, there it is. Because throughout your whole life, these wounds, which begin in early childhood, they get replicated by other arrangements of people, places, situations, but the same wound gets triggered again and again. It's very important to write what you feel about what was happening around that feeling. See if you can remember how old you were, who your relatives were who were around. Were your grandparents there? If you have photographs of your parents when they were younger, of you when you were younger, of other people, places, your house, this can also help you to feel what happened and how it just went in deep in yourself, but that you're looking at it now as an adult and you're much more in your power as an adult than you were as a child. But these wounds that happen as a child get locked in. So the work of achieving personal spiritual power is to go back to those locked in wounds, and the process of writing and talking about it is a method for undoing it, unscrewing it, unlocking it, and also seeing it objectively, seeing it with distance. If possible, talk about it with your family members who experienced a similar situation, if you have some like this. If you don't, and if you feel so like tied into yourself, and your persona that you have created is so strong that there's no one in your environment that you feel that you can open up to and talk about it with, then sometimes it can be good to have an animal to talk with. If you have a dog or a cat, or there's one around, or pigeons or something like this, because your problem is you don't really want to say what you feel to another human being, because you don't want to trigger the reaction to you that you're used to. But an animal or a bird or a fish even is safe, and you need to have someone safe or something safe, a safe animal, to be able to express, write, talk. And one very good practice that can loosen up your writing if you really can't bring yourself to put any marks on a piece of paper is to just give yourself a commitment that I will write anything, whatever comes, whether it has to do with the situation or not, doesn't matter. Write anything, even if it's nonsense, but you're just doing something which lets something flow. A very good thing is to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to cover 3 pages in words. And sometimes even if you do this with your non-dominant hand, automatic writing, this is very revealing, because later on, a few days later, when you read it, you can get some surprises, you can get some insights. I wrote this, I think this, really. And you begin to realize there's 2 completely different beings that are you. One of them is real, suppressed, negated, and the other one is artificial. And the work of personal spiritual empowerment is this shift away from the artificial, which is constructed as a survival mechanism. Come away from that artificial and come to the real. Coming to the real, you feel, yeah, I am actually a very good person. When it comes to dealing with this word, you will not be good enough, you'll never make it, have a look at the things that you've achieved. Some of your writing can refer to what you have done, what you do in your childhood, where you get negative feedback, stops you from achieving accomplishments. But as an adult, discover your hobby, discover something that you like doing, and do it, and see how you yourself like it. And maybe there'll be even someone around you who will also like it, and they'll say, yeah, this is good. There may be 100 people who rubbish it, but one person says, no, I like this. And that will actually be a very good flag for you to use for yourself, that, okay, 100 people don't like it, but someone likes it. And it acts as something that goes against all of these 100, but which is really quite powerful. Because you need to begin to believe in yourself. And even if your belief in yourself comes from someone else recognizing you, feeling you, liking you, it can be very powerful. One of the things you may experience is that nobody can see you. They see your persona, they see what the illegitimate authorities saw who disempowered you, but there'll be someone in your life sooner or later who sees you. And it's very, very important, this experience of being seen. Because when somebody sees you, it lets you know that this real you that you suspect, that you occasionally get glimpses of, this real you is for real because someone saw it, and that you are something. This you can build on. So when you're writing, sometimes you must also write this. Someone saw me, and they saw I was good, I was worthwhile, I was beautiful, I was valuable, I have a place, I am loved, Tell yourself these things in a very, very real way, that this one saw me and so I can also see me. Sometimes when you do this, it might make you feel very deep emotion of sadness. Sometimes you're mad, angry, sometimes sad. Sad because there is so much that has been taken away from you, so much of your life that has been denied, and so you lost a lot. And when you realize and you feel that, yeah, I lost so much, and you allow yourself to feel that sadness, though you may say, okay, that's a negative emotion, but it's not necessarily a negative emotion. It's a real emotion. You feel the sadness that after all this time, finally, one person saw me, one person felt me, one person made contact with me, and so I could make contact with myself. And it will make you feel sad, but that sadness is a really beautiful, intimate and real feeling of I, the self, coming into my power. You might not think sadness is coming into your power. Why it's coming into your power is because it's real. What takes you away from your power is the unreal. And there has been so much unreal piled on you, so much. And when you realize how much it is, and you feel that sadness, or sometimes you might feel angry about it. And that angry feeling is also not negative, though it's maybe classified as negative. It's a real feeling. You have a right to be angry. It doesn't mean you have to be destructive, but just feel the sadness, feel the anger, and let that feeling take you to yourself, your real self. Validate your feeling. Validate the anger, the sadness, maybe you can't even necessarily put a word on your feeling, but feel it, because it brings you to you. How does meditation help in this? Once you have felt those real feelings and write them, or draw them, or paint them, then also take time to meditate on these feelings. So let us just go for a moment into that inner quiet state. The pure, peaceful self, was not seen, but I'm beginning to see myself. I was not well reflected, but now there are some in whom I can see my real self reflected back. I can feel my sadness, that it is all right to be sad. I can feel my loneliness, that it is all right to feel lonely. And behind the loneliness and behind the sadness, I feel strength. Allowing the self to feel the real feelings means I can go behind them. There are layers and layers. Numbing the feelings denies me access to what's behind them. Feeling them gives me access. I begin to enter new territory in my inner world. Behind the sadness, there is peace. Sadness is like a covering. Below the covering, something beautiful becomes visible. You go deep inside and you feel how wonderful you are. Feelings begin to emerge where you realize that the best thing of all is that I am me. I would not want to be anyone else. Whatever the negative experiences, they are on the surface, and I'm going in deep way below the surface, where negative experiences have not penetrated. I see the beauty of my heart, the magnificence of my soul. I feel it, I know it. This is me. Savor it. Allow it to persist. To grow. To fill empty spaces in your being. You feel light and a beautiful resonance that comes from your innermost being. You feel invincible, strong, solid, and clear. You're not concerned with anyone else. Just I am with me. I am in my power. I know what it feels like. I hold it. It amplifies. It becomes an indelible part of me. And no one can take it away. Then let yourself gently return back to the regular daily environment where you're connected with the day-to-day world, but still feel that resonance, that essence of your being, and carry it out into the drama of the world. So you have a few things, a few exercises, a few practices that you can work with. Writing, making symbols, making sounds that correspond to your wound. Expressing what you're discovering to trusted people, or an animal, or a tree, or a flower. Expressing yourself and going deep to your inner space to feel what lies behind those wounds that was never damaged. The damage was to the surface, but not to the core. So practice going to your core, taking time to meditate, think about it, and gradually make your sense of personal power more and more solid, and make that shift whenever you get the chance. Practice this. Thank you. We'll see each other again next time.